Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV18 special as we count down to the budget, the last full budget ahead of the general elections in 2024. All eyes are on the finance minister. Will budget 2023 be a budget that builds on the previous year's announcements? Or will the finance minister surprise the citizen and industry with some fresh triggers to accelerate growth? The Confederation of Indian Industry and CII, like every year, has come up with its recommendations for the finance minister ahead of the budget. From the economic policy standpoint, they say the key focus should be on augmenting both domestic and external demand, promoting investment and generating employment. Interestingly, CII is also batting for a cut in personal income tax. They also recommend standardizing holding periods and capital gains tax rates across asset classes. Well, to talk more about the mood that industry goes into Budget 2023 with, joining me on the CII panel, Sanjiv Bajaj, the President of CII, Sanjiv Puri, the Vice President of CII, Chandrajit, Banerjee, Director General of CII, and Dinesh, the President Designate of CII. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV18. Sanjiv Bajaj, let me start by asking you, we're literally counting down now to the budget. What's the mood across industry? Do you expect this budget to consolidate on the promises made over the last few years? Or are you expecting the finance minister to pull out a rabbit from her hat?
What I would say, Shereen, is that the mood is cautiously optimistic. We hope that this budget will consolidate on the issues raised earlier and will take forward also a number of important issues. Starting with fiscal management is going to be key. We believe that we need to adhere to the fiscal deficit target of 6.4% of GDP for this fiscal, start moving to 6% in the next year, and then eventually get to 4.5% by FY26. And this is because our external situation is still quite uncertain. So we want to ensure a reasonable level of macroeconomic stability in India in these times. To do this, I believe that the government should continue to focus aggressively on privatization, and we can talk about some of those things more, but continue to do that and also focus on revenue augmentation as well. So we would like to see this. In addition, there are some of the key points. The government has been very focused on an investment-led growth strategy. We hope we continue to see that in the coming budget as well, with a 35% increase in public capex like the previous year. We need to continue boosting consumption demand, and that's where you mentioned about rationalizing of personal income tax levels. We see that it is people at the lower income level who got hit through the pandemic and higher inflation the most. And that's why what we're recommending is a rationalization at this lower income level. I think that's important to note. And lastly, we need to look at all this. We need to look at agriculture so that overall, whether in urban or rural India, we're generating more jobs.
Yes, I think the point that you make as far as fiscal consolidation is well taken. And because the government has the buffer on account of strong tax collections this time around, the expectation is that at least for the year, they will be able to meet the fiscal deficit target, if not improve it slightly. But the question is that glide path to 4.5%. But Sanjiv Puri, let me address the issue of consumption with you. As Sanjiv Bajaj pointed out, we have seen on account of high inflation as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact being borne by the bottom end of the pyramid. Now, in terms of consumption demand, what do you believe the government can do? What are you hoping that the government does in the budget?
Okay, let me start off by saying that, as you know, there have been concerns on consumption at the rural end. Right? So I think we are seeing signs of pickup. And if you dissect the rural economy, it's really 1/3 rural wages, 1/3 farm incomes, and 1/3 off-farm incomes. So we are certainly seeing rural wages are up. We also believe realizations will be better as far as the farm incomes are concerned. So net, I think it's a positive. So I do believe that rural will pick up. Having said that, I think we are still not out of the woods. Overall consumption needs to be boosted. And the fundamental pillar to that, I think, is really either through having more money in the hands of the consumers, which Sanjiv just alluded to in terms of the income tax at the bottom end, or the other is about creating jobs. And I think the PLI schemes have worked well. There's an opportunity to expand it, and there is some, some mention of it already through some large employment generation sectors, whether there is apparel or toys or footwear, amongst others. The second is, of course, to build on farm incomes, to exploit the full potential of agriculture. I think the trajectory that has been started in earlier budgets with focus on inducing technology, with focus on aggregation through FPOs, the agri-infrastructure funds, I think those are the right steps, and we should build on it and maybe work out mechanisms through cluster based to accelerate the progress, intensify investments in research and development. And the third sector, I think it's also an opportunity, given that India holds the presidency of G20, is also about the opportunity in the tourism sector. And that's been part of the strategy also of the government to showcase what India has to offer. Now, that's an area where India has tremendous opportunity, and we can actually work together, showcase it, and create the enabling interventions so that tourism also multiplies over time. Tourism itself is, can create as much as 50 million jobs in the next few years.
Well, yes, that is, of course, that has been a long-standing demand that India put its focus on the tourism sector. In fact, I was having a conversation with the Civil Aviation Minister, Jyotiraditya Scindia, on Wednesday, the National Tourism Day, and the plan is to try and put together an integrated approach, combining civil aviation with hospital tourism and hospitality, and, of course, try and capitalize on the G20 opportunity. Infrastructure status is the big demand for the sector as far as industry is concerned. Chandrajit, Banerjee, what's the expectation? How different is this budget likely to be, given the fact that this is going to be the last full budget ahead of the general elections?
So, like what has been just said, Shereen, I would think that we really need to focus on consumption demand. And I think that's something that we would certainly expect to see. There has to be a focus on growth, obviously, pursuing an investment-led growth strategy is what we have been talking about, and the budget should actually keep that, increase allocation to capital expenditure by 35%, like what it did last year, taking the total capex, so to say, to 10 lakh crores. And as was said, we must also actually see much of it is focused on the rural, which will create that employment in the rural areas, boost rural demand, which has been sort of a concern while there is some pickup. The third thing I would think, which one would look out for in the budget, you know about the PLI. We've seen some good results of it. There has been some issues. We would look at that PLI getting extended, and also to look at something like an employment-linked incentive scheme. But tourism was one sector, but there are other sectors like logistics, retail, many others, newer sectors which was brought in the last budget, the AVGC, say for instance, animation could be, I would expect that in the budget, and the government could consider something like a urban employment guarantee scheme. That could be something important. And last, I think I want to mention one point. There has been recognition, and there has been a strong recognition towards business. And I think for this budget, it could consider something like a cross-ministry compliance commission to rationalize, digitize, as well as and decriminalize. That's India's regulations. 65,000 plus compliance requirements. Can we have something towards that? These are some of my expectations, which is quite similar, but in some cases I thought I'll bring in some of the other points that I had in mind.
CB, the Urban Employment Guarantee Scheme has been a recommendation that CII has put on the table for the last several years. The government has veered away from acting on that. Even the employment-linked schemes that you talk of to generate employment, the tax incentives, that again I know has been a demand that CII has put on the table. But again, that hasn't found favor with the government so far. Let's see if this is going to be the year that things change. But Mr. Dinesh, let me come to you now and address the larger issue. One, of course, as Sanjiv Bajaj was pointing out, to ensure that macroeconomic stability continues. The government has done well on that, and all indications suggest that, they would like to continue on the path of fiscal consolidation. But outside of that, on some of the pending things, privatization, especially bank privatization, etc. We haven't seen the changes being brought in. The bills haven't moved through Parliament. Is there now, a realization or an acknowledgement within industry that that's going to be parked aside for now?
Thank you, Shereen. I think the way I would look at it is that I think they have done significant steps, especially with the LIC going public, which I think has been a big step forward, maybe created the largest corporation out of India. So I think the intent is very much there. But considering the time we have and also the plans which have been put in place, I do believe there will be further continuation of that. And I think that's something which CII has been pushing for. But having said that, I think the public-private partnership is something which has been on the agenda for a long period of time. And that's something which I think we will really look forward to taking further momentum. And let us not forget, like we said, last year has been a significant achievements have happened with the various initiatives which they've taken, not only with LIC, but also Air India and the others which have been closed. So for us, I don't think there will be a pause. I think it will continue. And that's something which from CII side, we will definitely be looking forward to continuing to happen. But having said that, on the public-private partnership side, especially with regard to the Gati Shakti initiatives which have been put in place, I believe there will be a huge opportunity for both the private sector and the government to work together to further the capex being spent and also the utilization of the capex, which will again lead to further employment generation.
Well, on that note, we'll take a break and continue our conversation with the leaders from the Confederation of Indian Industry on what they want from Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman.